the Royal Casino, they actually went to trial for laundering money, and they got off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Todd, Denkin, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming the King of Pot. With me, as always, is the King of Pot, my cousin Bruce Perlowin. Bruce, how you doing this week?
I'm doing really good, Todd. And you?
Awesome. It's really been so much fun talking about the old days and, how you became the King of Pot. I mean, Brett's stories last week were really incredible. The perspective of a boat captain, out in the middle of the ocean, and your perspective was really interesting to look at. So thanks for bringing Brett on, and I hope he comes on again sometime.
Yeah, he probably will, because a couple of trips in the future, he was an integral part of that, and we want to get his story.
Awesome. All right, so you have this huge successful load, picking up from last week, and everything is going great. You're rocking and rolling. Tell us what's happening, now that everyone's been paid off after the big Brett load.
Okay, so after Brett got towed in by a boat called the Falcon, he was on the Carolyn, goes right past the Coast Guard station, underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, underneath the Richmond Bridge, and successful load, rolling in dough, $9-10 million, somewhere around that. And next thing he does...
So wait a second. So $9 million. So you got like in 20s, or they're hundreds, and where is this $9 million?
The money comes in and goes out as quick as possible. I never wanted to have more than $1 million, actually $250,000 at any one place at any one time. So there's an order to who got paid first. The Colombians got paid first. The crew of the boat, $300,000, they get paid second. And then there's a bunch of money being laundered all over the world: Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, the Cayman Islands, Panama, a few other places.
Let's talk about that for a second. What does it take to get the money to the Colombians to get paid? And what does it take to get the money into a Panamanian bank account?
Two separate things. The Colombians wanted $100 bills because they got to take it back to Colombia. So any hundreds we got, we saved those for the Colombians. The crew didn't care. The captain and crew, the $300,000 for that. The $300,000 or whatever I paid for the offloaders, they didn't care. But the Colombians did. So often we would fly to Las Vegas with 20s. Two techniques. One is you take $100,000 or $250,000 and you put in 20s and you give it to the cage. You go out and you gamble for one day, 1 hour, whatever, whenever you feel comfortable. And then you go back to the cage and say, okay, here, I want to cash all my chips in, and they pay you in hundreds. So you've effectively converted the 20s to the hundreds.
Right, and you're doing this like as just a random, civilian walking in with a suitcase of cash, and as a pretend gambler. You don't have a deal with a casino yet.
Right. Now, later on, the next step, the second thing was we did have a deal.
So talk about that. Talk about walking into a casino with $250,000 and, plopping that on the counter. That was like no problem. There wasn't security. What's going on at that point?
No security. I did it one time with $100,000. I gambled. I went to play blackjack. Lost $17,000, really pissed me off. One cash got by, whatever was left, the $83,000 in hundreds, and never gambled again. I learned my lesson. I mean, you do a little bit of gambling so you look normal, and but you maybe go to the restaurant. You don't want to go and drop it off and an hour later pick it up. You want to spend 3 or 4 hours, especially if you're dropping off $250,000. That transition to, we just paid a casino, we just brought it in. The casino owners would just take the 20s, count it, and give us back hundreds and take 3% VIG. So,
oh, wow. You were just kind of laundering money through the casino, and then you started doing it with the casinos knowing about it.
Yeah. Two casinos knew about it.
Which ones were they?
The Royal Casino, I think maybe it was only one. The Royal Casino, and they actually went to trial for laundering money, and they got off. They won the trial. I wouldn't testify. In fact, I told my lawyer to tell the prosecutor that these guys were always told that it was fish money, not drug money. So, that got to them, and it wasn't. So they did. Obviously, they want me to testify because I'm going to tell them it was fish money. But they got off. They may have lost their license. I don't know. The Royal Casino, I believe, did eventually shut down. So that was way more efficient and way easier
than getting it to an offshore bank.
Okay, now getting it to the offshore bank is a different mechanism.
Well, what was it easier then? Was it easier than getting it to an offshore bank, or?
Yeah. What we would do, we'd fly the money to Florida. And then you got to be careful. Okay, here's a typical way you get through. You go through security. There was much security back then. And let's say Craig and I would go through, and we'd be loaded with money. Let's say $100,000 in our pockets, in our boots, everywhere. And we go into the bathroom, and he would give me his $100,000. Now I got $200,000 on me. I put it in my briefcase because you're already past security check. He'd go back out of the airport, get another $100,000 or $200,000, come back through security, in his boots, in his pants, not enough to trigger any alerts. And we'd go back to the bathroom and he'd give me that $250,000. So you
That's
do this
hysterical. And this is way before like TSA days, obviously. So what are they, just wanding you with looking for a medal, I suppose?
Yeah,
and
I don't think
it's not suspicious him walking back and forth from the parking lot to the bathroom.
No, he only did it a couple of times, and you don't know. He's just another person. Nobody's watching for one guy walking back and forth.
Yeah,
that was just one way of doing it. Another way, if weren't flying a lot of money, like say we could take $100,000 easily on our bodies, he'd just do that and give me the money, and then he'd be gone. Then you get on the plane with your money in your briefcase and in your pockets. Most of it was out of your pockets and in the briefcase at that point, because you walk around with $250,000, $500,000 in a briefcase. Nobody knows it's in there. Which is like no big deal. You're not weird.
As long as you're
paranoid.
nonchalant about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it became second nature. So you go to Miami. I would give it to Charlie Brune or Ted Corey or Jack DuBard, and they would rent a Lear jet, and they would fly to the Cayman Islands and deposit it into the Bank of the Cayman Islands. So that's part of the mechanism. Now, from the Caymans, they would ship it to Luxembourg or Liechtenstein or Panama. We never flew to Panama directly, always through the Caymans, and then you do a wire transfer. And when you bought a boat, the Cayman Island Bank would wire the money to the, let's say, First Cabin. That's who we bought most of our boats from, or whoever we were buying the boat from. And and we would book it as a loan to a company that we made up, and never pay the loan back. But it looked all legitimate, in the paper trail all worked.
That must have been just an entire big part of your industry, just moving the money around.
It's a massive amount of work and a total logistics. Had 3 to 5 people. That's all they did full time was launder money. Well, more than that.
And these are people you got to trust, right? These are people that, have a lot of responsibility, $9 million. Well,
I remember we gave Ted Corey $200,000, and he told us he did the thing, transfer, got it, and in the parking lot he got robbed. Well, he didn't get robbed. We found out he gambled the money away because he was a habitual gambler. So yeah, we trusted Ted, but he had a bad habit of gambling. And we found out
you got to hire
later.
Guys with no vices. That's the key.
Yeah, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I bet.
In that industry.
It's hard to find a money launderer, drug smuggler who doesn't have a vice.
Yeah. I used to think, well, you got to take the good with the bad. Like the captains and crews. Who's going to go all the way down to Colombia, get a boatload of marijuana, and come all the way back? All right, maybe they spend the money on a Cadillac, and they're not supposed to, But, you take the good with the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you got $9 million in the bank. You're coming off a big successful smuggle. What's happening next?
Okay. So Brett is up at the motorhome. We had $1 million worth of electronic equipment in this motorhome. It sounds like a lot of money, but it was, it looked like you were at like a NASA space center command post.
Talk about it. What was in there? Tell us.
Oh, everything. From the floor, there was a room, there's a secret room. It wasn't a secret room. It was the closet in the bathroom. You open the doors. From the floor to the ceiling was packed full with radio, scanners, all kinds of radios, from single sideband to VHF radios to CB radios, the 3 or 4 different kinds of scanners, a broadband, expensive scanner that scanned every frequency. Others were targeted on the frequencies that we knew the DEA and FBI transmitted on. Radionics for airplanes, so I could communicate with my plane. And then there was charts on the others in a different part of the motorhome, completely set up. Giant antennas up in the redwood trees, and it was parked on Skyline Boulevard, so you had a line of sight to the Pacific Ocean and you had a line of sight to the bay, so you can communicate all the way down. Ham radio was in there for long range, a single sideband for closer range, and then VHF for line of sight, shorter range.
And was somebody living in that Winnebago, or it was just sort of this makeshift office?
Well, it was parked, and there was a house there, so it was parked behind the house. And that's where Brett went, because he was doing the electronics for the next load, which was the Renee 2, or the Audrey J, actually. We changed the name on that boat. So the Audrey J, he's outfitting that, getting it ready. 2 months later, that comes in. At this point, it's so normal and regular that there's nothing outstanding. It wasn't sinking, nothing bad was happening, it wasn't towed in. It just came in like a normal day, like a walk in the park. Offloaded it, everything went smooth as silk. Then I probably made a tactical error. So, and
do tell.
Well, you're 29 years old, you're millions and millions of dollars, you just came off of 3 loads coming in. And what had happened, I kidnapped my own son. Now,
what?
I kidnapped Aubrey, my son, but I want to explain that.
Yeah.
I believe that a husband, an ex-husband, an family member who kidnaps their son and steals him from the mother is a despicable human being. That is not what happened here. So,
and yet you kidnapped your son.
Right, but not really. Okay, here's the story. Backstory. Diane and I get divorced. We got 6 months custody for her, 6 months custody for me. All right. So, and when we were back in Fort Lauderdale, I was in the Fort Lauderdale house, one of the water houses, and Aubrey lived with me for my 6 months, which was July to the end of the year, to December. Hers was January to June, the end of June. So when it was her time to come, she moved in the house. I mean, we're broken up. She's dating, I'm dating, but she moved in the house for her 6 months. So Aubrey still could play with his friends, his best friends who were around the block. He'd go play with them all the time. Then it was my 6 months. She moved out.
That's funny.
Live with someone or live by herself. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, so for 18 months, he lived in the same house, so we were somewhat stable. Now, in the end of 78, we moved to California, and it was my 6 months. It was the second half of the year, so I took him with me, and we've got videos of him, getting on Avons and going out and seeing the whales, which is an amazing story when we did that and practicing.
Yeah, I remember the picture actually of him sitting in the Zodiac as you guys are, about to launch it offshore.
Right. So he was having a ball. Christmas comes. Of course, he has a giant Christmas because we got millions of dollars, got all kinds of presents. And I then sent him back to Florida at the end of December because it's now Diane's turn for her 6 months custody from, January to June. 3 months after I send him back, Becky gets pregnant. And I tell Diane that Becky's pregnant. And Diane says, well, you're starting a new family, so you never have to see your son again. And I go, what? He goes, yeah, you're a fugitive and you may keep him. I go, what do you mean keep him? I just sent him back after Christmas. He goes, no, give me $50,000 and I'll let you see him.
So there it is. I'll let you see him for $50,000. It's kind of like your mom, Aunt Helen, allowing Craig into the business because you gave her 30 grand. So it seems like everybody's got their hand out, huh?
Yes, that's all right. So, now I've just made millions of dollars. I'm not going to bow down to extortion and blackmail. I'm a tough guy, right? I'm a smuggler, an outlaw, bandit. Running I'm the kingpin. I'm not going to pay ransom. So she disappears. she changes his name from Aubrey Perlowin to Aubrey Arias, her last name, and moves. And I had no idea where he was the entire year of 1979. I was looking for him. I hired 3 different private detective agencies to track him down and find him. Okay.
And how's that make you feel, just as a dad, I mean, what are you thinking about what's happening and really what's going on?
It was devastating. I remember I kept him for 18 months. I mean, he was when we first got divorced, she moved to Gainesville. I followed up there so I could be with my son and play with them. And so, now he's gone from my life. And that's pretty hard for any father. It's probably worse for a mother, but for a father, for me, it hit me pretty hard. So I'm going to find him. I got the money to track him down. And I did. I finally I hired an investigator. He found him. And he rented an apartment right where Aubrey was. And he was making videos and sending me the videos of Aubrey. He would take him fishing and befriended him. So now I know exactly where he is. So now it's 1980. What is that? A year and a half later, I finally find him. And I go and I kidnap him. Now, when I say I kidnap him, I didn't kidnap him. I picked him up. It was in July. I had custody at the time. So I waited. I waited for like 3 or 4 months after he was found. I said, wait, let me do this in July because I have legal custody at the time. So I fly to Miami. He's in the pool. I go, Aubrey. He goes, and it freaked me out because I didn't recognize him. Even though I saw him on videos, he had grown. And for a moment, I go, are you Aubrey? He goes, yeah. I go, come here. He goes, well, no, I got to go talk to him. I go, come here. I'm your dad. And he swims over, and I grab him out of the pool. I throw him over my shoulder. No, I hold him like this, and I'm running, and he's screaming, Mom, Mom, and he's crying. And I run by some people that were out there. I go, oh, he just cut his foot. I got to take him to the hospital. It's an excuse to why I'm running away with this child.
Clever. Very clever.
You got to think fast on your feet when you're a smuggler.
And when you're kidnapping, but not really kidnapping.
Right. So now I fly back out to California. Well, it was logistically what happened. We're in South Florida. We drive to the Tamiami airport, an airport on the West Coast in Tampa, and we fly to Las Vegas. We go to Circus. He's in heaven. He goes, Mom, who? I'm having a ball. Then from there,
he's looking for his payout, like his mom.
So that was a private plane. We flew him to there, and then we took a commercial plane from Vegas back to San Francisco and drove to Ukiah. He's in heaven. We put him in a school, a nature school, a Montessori nature school. They're teaching him all about the nature and stuff like that as part of the curriculum.
And now you're married to Becky at this time, right?
Yes, I'm married to Becky, and he's got a little brother now. So the Reese was about it's Jeremy Reese. He goes by Reese now. He was about 9 months old at this point. So he's got a little brother. He's got a 6-wheel drive that he's driving all over. He's got 50 workers, and he's he was in heaven. He loved being out, and we're on 250 acres in Northern California in a beautiful home. So he's all happy as can be. But meanwhile, Diana's not as happy as can be. I just got my son. I rescued him from the kidnapping, and I consider her kidnapping him, And so, I consider what I did was rescuing him and bringing him to this wonderful world. So she gets a policeman to follow up on the case. He says, look, he kidnapped my son, and he's a fugitive. Now, it was a fugitive. All right. So
you were a fugitive because of stuff that you were doing in Florida with the Boyd brothers, right?
Correct. Yeah. Daryl faked his own death, and he went to New York.
Right.
I went to California.
Right. Got it.
All right. So now we're out there, and I fly in my plane. It's a private plane into the Ukiah airport, and I noticed there's 3 or 4 people there that are never there. Just milling around. And I came this close to saying, Alex, our pilot, take off again.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I walked out. They walked up to me and they go, are you Steve Travis? I go, yeah. He goes, we have a warrant for your arrest. Then they tell Becky, they go, we know that Steve Travis is really Frank Woods. Because that was my second fake ID. And she goes, ooh. Meanwhile, we all get thrown in jail. Okay. Now I'm in county jail in Ukiah.
But you're in county jail as Steve Travis.
No, it's Bruce Perlowin at this point.
Oh, okay, at that point? Okay.
I'm not sure if they knew who the heck I was.
Yeah, well, they thought you were Frank Woods.
Right. and they just know there's an outstanding warrant. They didn't know it was Bruce Perlowin. So I think you're right. It was a Steve Travis, Frank Woods. And I have $100,000 bail. Okay. Now at this point, we're moving. We're moving boats. We're moving back and forth. At this point, I get arrested, and there's a boat about to come into the dock. All right?
Uh-oh.
And nobody knows what's going on. Do they know about the smugglers? Do they know about the boat? Do they know about the dock? Do they know about my big, giant operation? I mean, it was huge, multi-millions of dollars, laundering money all over the door. What did they know? Or is it an isolated incident just for the kidnapping and for the Miami warrant? Now, just to finish this kidnapping story, when I did go to Miami to stand trial, which is a whole amazing story, the trial, but they looked at the indictment, the custody agreement, and they said, wait a minute, he has custody of, right now. And so they dropped that. So there was no kidnapping charge. It was dropped because I had custody. All right, so I'm in county jail, and my lawyers are coming in, and I go and talking to me, and we're trying to figure out what do they know, what don't they know? Do they know about the bigger conspiracy out in California, or is it just, like I said, isolated to the one Jamaica load in Florida? And I say to my lawyer, ask Craig, did everything go okay? I know, a week, I'm in jail for 7 days, and I know the boat's due that day.
Yeah.
And so
are you freaking out, or do you have? Are you like, oh God, what are we going to do? But you got your boy Craig right by your side to handle this.
We had a well-oiled machine, all right, and I wasn't freaking out. I just want to know the facts so I could deal with them. Whatever the facts are, they are. We'll deal with it. We'll pivot. We'll fix it. We'll get lawyers. All right?
Yeah. And
so at that point, he comes back in the next day. I go, oh, by the way, did you ask Craig if everything went okay? And he goes, yeah, I did. He goes, what did he say? He goes, oh, yeah, everything went really good. I go, well, did he say it like matter-of-factly, or was he very excited about it? He goes, oh, he was like really excited. He goes, what's that all about? I go, never mind. So I knew that load had been successful. Okay, so I'm in jail. We don't know what's really going on. We don't know, is it an isolated incident from the Florida Jamaican smuggle, or do they know about every single thing that's going on out in California, the boat coming in, the dock, the stash houses and all that? And so that's a concern. But Craig is now basically running the show. I knew that the load came in. I knew that he just made another $9 million, or not made that profit, but another $9 million revenue came in. And I knew that there was another boat on the way up. By the way, at that time, we were, again, in 1980, we knocked it out of the ballpark. Everything we learned in Florida, we applied out there. I'll give you one little detail about the dock. When the first truckload was loaded with 15,000 pounds, the guy would get in the truck. Now you got to start that truck and drive it off. And like I said last time, once you see that go over the San Rafael Richmond Bridge, everyone's thrilled because you can see it from the dock. And then the next truck would back up into their position. But when they started the truck, they started them up at the same time, so that you just have one starting thing, and not then a couple minutes later, making a lot of noise. So everything
That's an interesting detail that not a lot of people would think about. Do you think it really helped, not draw attention to the whole thing?
Absolutely. The reason, this is 1980, and the radical left was blowing up oil refineries, in protest for something. I mean, I know I was in jail with 5 Puerto Rican terrorists, and they were blowing up stuff. So I don't know if it was that particular group or the other group, but that was like a common theme, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, blowing up oil refineries. So you had that cop patrolling to protect the oil refineries, looking for terrorists. And all of a sudden, they find Donnie with a walkie-talkie. Doesn't look real good. Thank God he had the private detective agency guy's card in his wallet. And the cop actually did call the guy, and the guy did verify the story. And then the guy says, oh, I saved the whole load. Give me $50,000. And we said, what? Okay, so to wrap this up, I get bailed out of jail. 10 days later, another boat comes in. And that's for next episode. And that was a pretty interesting story, way more interesting than this one. So stay tuned, and you're going to hear the amazing story about what happens when a boat comes in and nobody's there.
Uh-oh. Right. What happens if you have a smuggle and nobody shows up? Well, that's what we're going to talk about next week, right here on Becoming the King of Pot. And, of course, Bruce Perlowin, the King. Thanks for joining us again, and we will see you next time, right here on Becoming the King of Pot.